In a luxurious hall, the groom's mother is publicly humiliated at her own son's wedding. What no one expected was that the lady, silent and seemingly fragile, harbored a surprising strength. With wounded dignity, she transforms pain into courage and makes a decision that changes everything. And what began as a silent fall ends with a twist that echoes throughout the entire nation. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching us from. We continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear. The morning light streamed through the window blinds as Mrs. Eleanor Albright adjusted the only wedding portrait she still kept on her solid wood dresser. At 68, the wrinkles on her face told stories of a life dedicated to work and her only son, Luke. The simple apartment in Queens, southern New York City, was small, but always impeccably clean and organized, a reflection of its methodical owner's personality. Since becoming a widow to Sebastian almost 20 years ago, Mrs. Albright had taken on all responsibilities alone. She had worked as a seamstress, cleaner, cook, and even a door-to-door saleswoman to ensure Luke had opportunities she never had. Her son, now with a degree in business administration and a promising job at a multinational corporation, was her greatest pride, though visits had become increasingly rare since he started dating Vanessa Miller, daughter of a real estate mogul. "Mom, we're getting married," Luke announced during a Sunday lunch 3 months ago. Mrs. Albright remembered that day perfectly. Her son had brought Vanessa, who, with her studied gestures and designer clothes, seemed out of place in the simplicity of that kitchen. "It's going to be in October, at the Crystal Gardens Ballroom. Vanessa's father will help with the expenses." "That's a blessing, my son," Mrs. Albright replied, hiding her concern about the costs of a wedding of that scale. "I can help with whatever is needed." The ballroom of the Crystal Gardens Ballroom shimmered under the light of hundreds of crystalline lamps. Arrangements of white orchids and pastel roses decorated each table, while a trail of petals marked the path to the makeshift altar, where Luke and Vanessa would exchange vows within a few hours. Outside, luxury cars parked one after another, bringing elegantly dressed guests who commented on the sumptuousness of the decor. Mrs. Albright arrived by taxi, a luxury she allowed herself on that special day. The navy blue dress she had bought from Regina fit perfectly after a few adjustments. Around her neck, a simple artificial pearl necklace she had bought at Fulton Street Market completed the look. In her handbag, she carried Mrs. Jasmine's embroidered handkerchief, her most precious relic, which she intended to give to her son as a symbol of blessing. At the entrance to the hall, a receptionist consulted the guest list. "Eleanor Albright?" she asked, scanning the list with a golden pen. "That's right. I'm the groom's mother," Mrs. Albright replied, nervously adjusting her necklace. The young woman made a mark on the list and called one of the organizers, whispering something in his ear. The man, wearing an impeccable suit, approached Mrs. Albright with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Albright, this way, please. Your table is number 32. Mrs. Albright followed the young man through the hall, noticing that they passed dozens of decorated tables until they reached the most secluded area, practically at the back of the hall. Table 32 was the last one, located so far from the altar that the main decoration could barely be seen. At it, some people were already seated, all with the same out-of-place air: a great-uncle of Luke who lived in rural Pennsylvania, 2 distant cousins he barely knew, and an old couple of neighbors from Queens. "Good evening," Mrs. Albright greeted, trying to hide her disappointment at being so far from her son on such an important day. Uncle Arthur, a man nearing 80, was the only one who recognized her immediately. "Eleanor, long time no see, girl? Not since Luke's baptism, right? And where's the boss of the party? Hasn't even come to greet us yet?" Mrs. Albright smiled sadly. "He must be busy, Mr. Arthur. So many people to greet." The ceremony began promptly at 8 in the evening. From her distant seat, Mrs. Albright could barely see when her son entered, accompanied by the groomsmen. She had to stand like all the guests when the wedding march announced Vanessa's entrance, dazzling in a dress that Mrs. Albright calculated must have cost more than everything she had earned in the last year. Throughout the ceremony, she tried to hold back tears, not from emotion as other mothers usually feel, but from a deep sadness at realizing how distant, physically and emotionally, she was from that moment. She remembered the day Luke was born, His first words, his hesitant steps down the apartment hallway, the night studying together for school exams. How had they reached this point? After the vows and the exchange of rings, guests were directed to the cocktail area, while the hall was rearranged for dinner. Mrs. Albright tried to approach her son to congratulate him, but the couple was surrounded by so many people that it was impossible to get close. Resigned, she returned to her distant table when everyone was called for dinner. The food was exquisite, served on fine china by white-gloved waiters, but for Mrs. Albright it tasted like cardboard. She watched from afar as her son laughed and chatted with guests at the head table, where Vanessa's elegantly dressed parents radiated pride and satisfaction. Every now and then, Luke would glance towards her table but made no move to go there. It was when the toasts began that Mrs. Albright felt she needed to act. Vanessa's father stood up, glass in hand, for an emotional speech about how his princess had found a worthy young man and how proud he was of the new entrepreneurial couple who would transform the New York City real estate market. There was applause, laughter, more raised glasses. Mrs. Albright took the embroidered handkerchief from her purse and, gathering courage, stood up. It was time to give her gift, her blessing, to say a few words to the son she had raised alone. She walked slowly between the tables, aware of the curious glances that followed her. As she approached the head table, she saw Luke turn slightly pale. "Mum," he murmured, visibly uncomfortable. "My son, I just wanted to give you my blessing and this handkerchief that—" Before she could finish, Vanessa stepped between them, her social smile replaced by an expression of irritation. "Mrs. Albright, we are in the middle of the official toasts. Could you please wait your turn? We have an order to follow here. I'm sorry, I just wanted to—" "Isn't it enough that you came in such a simple dress?" Vanessa continued, lowering her voice, but not enough for those nearby not to hear. "Are you trying to draw attention now?" Mrs. Albright felt her face burn. "No, this is not the time." Vanessa raised her voice, completely losing her composure. "You're ruining my night!" An awkward silence fell over the hall. All eyes turned to the scene. Luke, visibly intoxicated, just watched, unresponsive. It was then that Vanessa, with a sudden gesture, pushed Mrs. Albright to move her away from the table. It wasn't a violent push, but enough to unbalance the elderly woman, who stumbled backward, falling onto a side table, where champagne glasses and small floral arrangements stood. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the hall. Her navy blue dress was stained with champagne, and the embroidered handkerchief fell to the floor, being trampled by a waiter who rushed to help her. No one said anything for a few seconds. Then, as if in a macabre choreography, dozens of cell phones rose simultaneously, capturing the moment of humiliation. Flashes fired. Mrs. Albright, still on the floor, saw her son finally stand up, but instead of helping her, he just stood there, looking at his own shoes. It was a young waiter who approached, offering his hand to help her up. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked with genuine concern. "I am. Young man, thank you," Mrs. Albright replied, her voice trembling as she leaned on him to stand. "Let's go outside for some air," the young man suggested, gently leading her away from the stairs and cell phones. As they walked, Mrs. Albright could hear Vanessa regaining control of the situation with a forced laugh. "Looks like someone's had too much champagne. Let's continue with our celebration, please." In the entrance lobby, the waiter helped Mrs. Albright sit on a comfortable bench. "My name is Henry, ma'am. I work here on weekends to pay for law school. Do you want me to call a taxi?" "You're very kind, Henry, but I need my handkerchief." "It fell inside," she replied, still stunned. "I'll get it for you, ma'am. Don't leave here." While Henry returned to the hall, Mrs. Albright tried to process what had happened. The public humiliation, the camera flashes, the push, but most importantly, her son's inaction. Luke had done nothing, absolutely nothing, to defend her. The boy she cradled on feverish nights, for whom she sewed carnival costumes from scraps when she couldn't afford a ready-made one, for whom she gave up so much, remained seated, pretending not to know her. Henry returned a few minutes later, the embroidered handkerchief in hand. It was stained with champagne and had a high heel mark, but still recognizable. "I managed to get it back, ma'am." "I'm so sorry about the condition." "Thank you, my son. You were the only person who helped me today." The young man sat beside her, looking genuinely indignant. What happened in there was absurd. "A lot of people are talking about it, you know. Even the other waiters are outraged. One of them filmed everything, and it's already circulating in WhatsApp groups. He showed his cell phone screen to Mrs. Albright. There were several videos of the incident, shared among the ballroom staff and, apparently, among some guests. "You're the groom's mother, aren't you? How could he stand there and do nothing?" Mrs. Albright looked at the stained handkerchief in her hands and felt a determination grow within her. Mrs. Jasmine's words echoed in her mind, "You have more strength than you imagine." "Henry, could you please call a taxi for me? I need to go home now." While waiting for the taxi, Mrs. Albright made a decision. She would not accept that humiliation silently. She would not allow her son and that arrogant daughter-in-law to take possession of her home as if she were just a nuisance to be removed. She would have to act fast, as she knew that, after the honeymoon, they would try to convince her to sign papers, transfer properties, perhaps even suggest she move to some more suitable place for an elderly lady. "Your taxi has arrived." "Mrs. Albright," Henry informed, interrupting her thoughts. As she said goodbye, the young waiter wrote his phone number on a napkin. "If you need anything, you can call me. I'm finishing law school. Maybe I can help in some way." Mrs. Albright put the paper in her purse, grateful for the gesture of kindness amidst so much cruelty. On the way home, as she watched the city lights through the taxi window, a certainty formed in her heart. That night had been humiliating, but the story was not yet over. The last chapter would be written by her. The taxi dropped Mrs. Albright in front of her building shortly after 10 at night. The doorman, Mr. Anthony, who had known her for over 15 years, widened his eyes when he saw her condition. Stained dress, disheveled hair, red eyes from crying so much. "My goodness." "Mrs. Albright, what happened? Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mr. Anthony, just a small accident at the party. But you're already back? I thought your Luke's wedding would go on all night." "Well," she replied vaguely, not wanting to go into detail. "Good night." Inside the apartment, Mrs. Albright finally allowed herself to collapse. She sat on the worn sofa in the living room, still holding the stained handkerchief, and cried as she hadn't cried since Sebastian's death. They weren't just tears of sadness, but also of anger, disappointment, and most importantly, fear. Fear of the future, fear of losing her last material possession, fear of ending her life helpless after so much sacrifice. After a few minutes, she got up and went to the small chest where she kept family photographs. She found the folder with Luke's photos. Newborn in his exhausted mother's arms. First steps, school uniform on the first day of class. High school graduation. University diploma. In each image, the same look of maternal pride, the same smile of someone who believed she was building a better future for her son. "Where did I go wrong?" she asked the most recent photo, taken when Luke got the job at the multinational. "Was it for not giving you everything you wanted? For teaching you the value of simple things?" The silence of the apartment was her only answer. She put away the photos and went to the kitchen, where the hot chocolate tin with her savings was hidden. She counted the money again, $5,243, all her available capital, in addition to her minimum pension and the rent from the Brooklyn house. The house. She needed to protect it at all costs. It was her only security for old age, her inheritance from her parents, the roof that would shelter her when she could no longer work. But how to prevent Luke and Vanessa from taking possession of it? Legally, she had not made a will or any document that would prevent her son from inheriting everything after her death. And even in life, she feared they might manipulate her into transferring the property, perhaps claiming it was for her own good. Her cell phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Unknown number. Hello?" she answered hesitantly. "Mrs. Albright. It's Henry, the waiter from the ballroom." "Remember me?" "Of course, my son. What's wrong?" "Sorry to call so late, but I thought you should know. The videos of what happened at the party. They're spreading. A lot of people are outraged. An elderly lady here, a guest of the bride, even left the party in protest." Mrs. Albright felt her stomach sink. "My God. There's more. I mentioned the case to one of my law school professors, Dr. Paula Maxwell. She specializes in elder law and was very interested. She said she'd like to talk to you if possible." "To me? But why?" "She thinks what happened constitutes elder abuse. And when I mentioned what you told me about the house," Mrs. Albright hadn't told Henry anything specific about the house, only vaguely mentioned that she feared for her financial security. But the young man was smart and, as a law student, must have realized there was more to the story than a simple family disagreement. "Could Dr. Paula speak with you tomorrow?" Henry continued. "She said she could come to your house if you prefer. I don't know if I should get into legal matters with my own son, Mrs. Albright." Henry's voice became serious. "I saw what happened today. I saw how your son didn't lift a finger to defend you, and how that young woman treated you. You deserve to protect yourself." After a moment of silence, Mrs. Albright replied, "All right. Give my address to your professor. She can come tomorrow afternoon." After hanging up, Mrs. Albright felt strangely relieved to have made a decision, whatever it was. Perhaps this Dr. Paula could guide her on how to legally protect her property without causing a definitive break with her son. Because despite everything, she still loved Luke and held out hope that one day he would realize the mistake he was making. The next morning, Mrs. Albright woke to the sound of the doorbell. It was only 9 o'clock, and she had slept poorly, tormented by nightmares where she repeatedly fell before a crowd that filmed her. Opening the door, she found Mrs. Martha, her next-door neighbor, with a worried expression. "Eleanor, for heaven's sake, are you in the neighborhood WhatsApp group?" "No, Martha. You know I barely know how to use this phone." "Then you haven't seen—" Martha showed her own phone screen. "The wedding video. It's circulating in all the groups." Mrs. Albright felt her legs weaken as she saw the scene of her fall recorded and shared as a form of entertainment. In the video, Vanessa could be clearly heard saying, "You're ruining my night," before the push. And worse, Luke was seen sitting motionless as his mother fell among champagne glasses. Who would do such a thing to their own mother? Mrs. Martha asked, indignant. "Your Luke always seemed like such a polite young man." "People change, Martha," Mrs. Albright replied with deep sadness. "Or perhaps they only show who they truly are when they no longer need us." Throughout the morning, she received more visits and phone calls. Neighbors, old co-workers, even the coordinator of the community center, where she sometimes volunteered to teach sewing. Everyone had seen the video. Everyone expressed indignation and offered support. Around 3 in the afternoon, the doorbell rang again. This time it was a woman in her 50s, with short grey hair, wearing an elegant but discreet outfit. Beside her, Henry smiled shyly. "Mrs. Albright?" "I'm Paula Maxwell, Henry's law professor. Can we talk?" Mrs. Albright invited them in, offered coffee, which both accepted. As she served the cups at the kitchen table, she felt strangely comforted by the presence of these two strangers, who for some reason had decided to help her. "Henry told me what happened yesterday," Dr. Maxwell began after her first sip of coffee. "And I saw the videos, of course. As an attorney specializing in elder rights, I can tell you that what happened constitutes psychological abuse. And there's the aggravating factor of the push, which could have caused serious injuries. I don't want to sue anyone, Doctor. He's my son, after all. I understand perfectly. But Henry mentioned something about a property you fear losing." Hesitant at first, Mrs. Albright eventually told everything. The phone conversation she had overheard between Vanessa and her friend, the plan to sell the Brooklyn house, the insinuations that after the wedding things would change drastically. Dr. Maxwell listened attentively, sometimes making notes in a small notebook. "Mrs. Albright, I'll be direct. If your son and his wife decide to move into your house after the honeymoon, claiming it's temporary, or that they're helping you, it will be very difficult to remove them afterward. Legally, once residency is established, the eviction process becomes complicated, especially when dealing with family members." "And what can I do?" "There are several options. The most drastic would be to disinherit your son, but I understand that's not what you want. An alternative would be to create a lifetime usufruct, ensuring that you have the right to use and inhabit the property until the end of your life, regardless of who the formal owner is." Mrs. Albright frowned, trying to understand the legal terms. "But would that prevent them from selling the house?" "Not completely. With your permission, they could still alienate the property, although the buyer would have to respect your right to habitation. But there's another option." Dr. Maxwell paused, as if carefully weighing her next words. "Are you familiar with the New Dawn Institute? That foundation that cares for the elderly?" "Yes, I've heard of it. I'm their volunteer legal advisor. The Institute has a program called Safe Haven, where seniors can donate their properties to the foundation, retaining a lifelong and untransferable right to residency. In return, they receive assistance in case of need, and the guarantee that the property will be used after their passing to help other vulnerable seniors. Henry, who had been quiet until then, interjected, "That means neither Luke nor anyone else could sell the house or force Mrs. Albright to leave, right?" "Exactly," the lawyer confirmed. "Once the donation with reservation of usufruct is made, it becomes irrevocable. The property then belongs to the foundation, but Mrs. Albright would continue living there as if nothing had changed, for as long as she wishes." "And after?" Mrs. Albright asked, feeling a lump in her throat. "Afterward, the foundation can convert the property into a care home, sell it to fund assistance programs, or use it in the way that best serves its mission. But that would only happen after." "Well, when you no longer need it?" Mrs. Albright fell silent, absorbing the information. It was a drastic decision. It would mean giving up the possibility of leaving the house to Luke, something she had always planned to do. But, at the same time, it would guarantee her security and autonomy for the rest of her life. "I need to think," she said finally. "Of course," Dr. Maxwell replied, understanding. "But I urge you to consider it urgently. From what you told me, the couple returns from their honeymoon in 2 weeks. If they decide to settle in the house before you take action, the situation will become complicated." When the visitors left, Mrs. Albright sat alone on the living room sofa again, Mrs. Jasmine's stained handkerchief in her hands. She remembered her parents, how they had fought to keep that house, the pride they felt in being able to leave it to their daughter. And she remembered the humiliation of the previous night, Vanessa's contemptuous look, Luke's indifference. The phone rang again. It was Mrs. Martha, the neighbor. "Eleanor, you won't believe it. I just spoke with Susan from the bakery. Her brother-in-law is a rideshare driver and just took your son and daughter-in-law to the airport. It seems they decided to move up their honeymoon trip. Susan said she heard that Vanessa comment that upon their return they're going straight to the new house. Are you moving, Eleanor?" Mrs. Albright felt a chill. They were anticipating their plans, probably to avoid confronting her after the party scandal. "No, Martha. I'm not moving." After hanging up, she picked up the card Dr. Maxwell had left and dialed the number. When the lawyer answered, her voice was firm. "Doctor, I've decided to make the donation to the Institute. The sooner the better." "Are you sure, Mrs. Albright?" "It's an irreversible decision." Mrs. Albright looked at Mrs. Jasmine's handkerchief, now clean and ironed, resting on her lap. "I am, Doctor. He who does not respect does not inherit. That's what my mother always said." On the other end of the line, Dr. Maxwell seemed to smile. "In that case, I'll activate my contacts right away. We'll need witnesses, a notary public. We can arrange everything today if you allow it." "Today, that fast?" "Mrs. Albright, when it comes to protecting our elderly, every minute counts. And from what I understand, your son and his wife won't waste any time. Neither should we." The following hours passed in a whirlwind. After Mrs. Albright's call, Dr. Maxwell activated a veritable task force. Around 6 in the evening, the small apartment in Queens was filled with people. Besides the lawyer herself and Henry, there were 2 social workers from the New Dawn Institute, a notary public who was a personal friend of Dr. Maxwell, and 3 witnesses, Mr. Anthony, the doorman, Mrs. Martha, the neighbor, and Regina, the seamstress friend. At the kitchen table, transformed into an improvised office, documents were read, checked, and signed. The notary public, Dr. Oswald, a man nearing 70 with thick-rimmed glasses, patiently explained each clause. "This document, Mrs. Albright, formalizes the donation of the property located at Hydrangea Lane, number 247 Brooklyn, to the New Dawn Institute. This clause here guarantees your lifelong and untransferable right of habitation." Mrs. Albright listened attentively, signing where indicated, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. It was as if she was signing the end of a dream, that of leaving a material legacy to her son, and the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one in which her dignity and security would be protected. "And this last document," Dr. Oswald continued, "is a formal notification that will be delivered to your son, informing him about the donation and clarifying that any attempt to occupy the property without your express consent will be considered trespassing." Henry, who followed everything with professional interest, asked a question. "Dr. Oswald, can this donation be judicially contested?" The notary adjusted his glasses, pensive. "Theoretically, yes. Any legal act can be contested. But in practice, it would be extremely difficult. The donor is in full possession of her mental faculties. There are no indications of coercion or bad faith. And the purpose of the donation is noble, to support a charitable institution. Furthermore, the right to lifelong usufruct demonstrates that there is no prejudice to the donor. Courts have been consistent in upholding the validity of donations with these characteristics." Mrs. Martha, who observed everything with a mixture of astonishment and admiration, approached Mrs. Albright. "Are you sure about this, friend?" "It's your only asset." "I am, Martha. I'm not losing anything. Just ensuring that no one will kick me out of there. And afterward, afterward it will help other people in need." By 8 in the evening, all documents were signed, stamped, and registered. Dr. Oswald assured that they would be taken to the registry office first thing the next morning for definitive records. The deed to the Brooklyn house was now in the name of the New Dawn Institute, with a lifelong usufruct clause for Mrs. Albright. One of the social workers, Christine, explained the next steps. "Mrs. Albright, from now on you are part of our family. We have a program of regular visits to check if everything is all right, offer medical support if necessary, and help in any emergency. You will continue to live normally in your home, but you will never be alone again." When everyone had left, except Dr. Maxwell and Henry, Mrs. Albright sat on the sofa, exhausted but curiously at peace. "And now," she asked, "how are we going to communicate this to Luke and Vanessa?" Dr. Maxwell and Henry exchanged meaningful glances. "Well, we have two options," the lawyer explained. "We can wait for them to return from their honeymoon and deliver the formal notification, or we can intercept them tonight at the end of the party. The notification is already ready, and I have a court officer friend who can accompany us. It would be more impactful." Mrs. Albright fell silent, considering the options. She remembered the push, the camera flashes, the public humiliation, and then an idea came to her mind. If they humiliated me in public, perhaps they should hear the answer in public too. The three returned to the Crystal Gardens ballroom around 11 at night, when the wedding party was already winding down. Accompanying them was Dr. Clive, a retired court officer who had agreed to help as a personal favor to Dr. Maxwell. On the way, Henry showed Mrs. Albright the latest social media updates. The video of her fall had gone viral, with thousands of shares and indignant comments. Hashtags like "Respect the Mother-in-Law" and "Justice for Elena" were among the most trending topics on platforms. "You've become a symbol, you know," the young man commented, showing messages of support arriving from all over the country. At the ballroom, security tried to prevent them from entering, but the presence of a court officer with official documents quickly changed the situation. They were escorted into the hall where the party already showed clear signs of emptying out. Some guests danced on the floor, others chatted in small groups, and many had already left. At the head table, Luke and Vanessa, still in their wedding attire, talked with the bride's parents. The entrance of the unusual group caused an immediate silence. The music lowered, and all eyes turned to Mrs. Albright, now dressed in simple but dignified clothes, accompanied by people with determined expressions. Luke was the first to react, standing up with a mixture of surprise and irritation. "Mom, what does this mean? Who are these people?" Vanessa, beside him, looked about to have a meltdown. "You can't interrupt our party." "I'll call security." Dr. Maxwell stepped forward, serene and professional. "That won't be necessary. I am Dr. Paula Maxwell, attorney for Mrs. Eleanor Albright. We are simply here to deliver a formal notification." "Notification?" Luke repeated, confused. "What are you talking about?" It was then that Henry, demonstrating a technological skill Mrs. Albright would never have, plugged his cell phone into the ballroom's sound system. A microphone was handed to the elderly woman, who held it with trembling hands but a firm voice. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for interrupting this celebration again, but since I was publicly assaulted and humiliated earlier, I think it's fair that the response also be public." A murmur ran through the hall. Many guests raised their cell phones, as if anticipating a new viral moment. "Luke, my son, when you were born, I promised myself I would do everything to give you a better future than mine. I even sold my wedding ring to pay for your college entrance exam prep course. I worked 3 jobs simultaneously, so you could study at good schools. I never complained, never asked for recognition. I did everything for love. Silent tears began to stream down Mrs. Albright's face, but her voice remained firm. Tonight, when your wife pushed me and you did nothing to defend me, I realized I failed to teach you the most important value, respect. And without respect, there is no true love. Luke looked uncomfortable, glancing around as if seeking support or an escape route. Mom, can we talk about this in private? This isn't the place. No, Luke, he who humiliates in public hears in public. I came here to inform you that the Brooklyn house, the one where your grandparents lived, and which you and Vanessa plan to sell as soon as you return from your honeymoon, will not be available to you. All eyes turned to the young couple, especially to Vanessa, who turned pale. What are you talking about? We never... Spare me, Vanessa. I overheard your phone conversation with your friend Camilla. I know exactly what you were planning. Mrs. Albright made a gesture, and Dr. Maxwell approached with the documents. Tonight, I officially donated the property to the New Dawn Institute, a foundation that cares for vulnerable seniors. I retain my right to live there for the rest of my life, but afterward, the house will help people who truly need and deserve it. An astonished silence fell over the hall. Vanessa's father, Mr. Miller, stood up, visibly irritated. This is absurd. Madness. This donation has no legal validity. Dr. Clive, the court officer, stepped forward with his folder of documents. I beg to differ, sir. I am here precisely to attest to the legality of the act. All documents are in order, signed and notarized. The donation is perfectly valid, and as of this moment I consider the couple officially notified. Vanessa stood up, her face contorted with fury. You crazy old woman! You can't do this. Luke is your son, your only heir. Gun heir Vanessa is not just someone who receives material possessions. It's someone who carries values, respect, love. And he who does not respect does not inherit, neither my affection nor my possessions. A murmur of approval ran through the hall. Some guests even applauded discreetly. Cell phones continued to film every second of that surreal scene. Luke, visibly intoxicated and confused, tried a conciliatory approach. Mom, let's talk calmly. You're nervous, you're not thinking straight. On the contrary, son, I've never thought more clearly. If one day you want to be part of my life again, you will be welcome, but with respect and without interest in what I possess. Until then, I suggest you and your wife look for another place to live. Mrs. Albright handed the microphone back to Henry and turned to leave. At that moment, an elegant lady who had been observing everything in silence approached. It was Vanessa's grandmother. Mrs. Albright, we haven't formally met, but I want to apologize for my granddaughter's behavior. What happened here today does not reflect our family's values. The 2 elderly women exchanged a look of mutual understanding, transcending social and financial barriers. Deep down, they were just 2 grandmothers who wanted the best for their descendants even when they made mistakes. As they left the hall, Mrs. Albright could hear the confusion that had set in. Vanessa was yelling at Luke. Mr. Miller was arguing with the groom's father. Guests were commenting loudly on what they had just witnessed. The wedding party, which should have been a moment of joy and union, had transformed into an emotional and legal battlefield. In the taxi on the way home, Mrs. Albright felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. She had lost her son, at least temporarily, but had regained something more valuable, her dignity and autonomy. Are you all right, Mom? Henry asked, concerned. Mrs. Albright looked out the window, watching the city lights flash by. You know, young man, as I've gotten older, I've learned that there are 2 kinds of losses, those that diminish us and those that free us. Today I experienced both. Dr. Maxwell smiled, gently squeezing the elderly woman's hand. Mrs. Albright, you haven't lost a son. You've simply given him the chance to truly grow. Dawn found Mrs. Albright sitting in her living room armchair, watching the first ray of sun enter through the window. She hadn't slept. After the confrontation at the ballroom, she had returned home accompanied by Dr. Maxwell and Henry, who insisted on staying a little longer, concerned about her emotional state. Around 2 in the morning, when she finally convinced them that she was fine and needed to be alone, She plunged into a whirlwind of thoughts. Had she done the right thing? Had she been excessively harsh? And Luke, her only son, would he ever be able to forgive her? Her cell phone, charging on the coffee table, vibrated incessantly with notifications. Henry had installed a messaging app for her before leaving, explaining that you'll need to communicate with a lot of people in the coming days. At the time, Mrs. Albright didn't fully understand what he meant. Now she was beginning to comprehend. When she finally had the courage to check her phone, she saw dozens of messages from Mrs. Martha, from Regina, from old co-workers, even from people she hadn't seen in years. Everyone had watched the video, not just of her fall, but also of the response, as they were calling her intervention, at the end of the party. In WhatsApp groups, Facebook pages, and even on Instagram and TikTok, the story of the mother-in-law who got even was going viral at an impressive speed. The doorbell rang, startling her. For the first time in a long time, Mrs. Albright hesitated before opening the door. What if it was Luke, or worse, Vanessa? Was she ready for another confrontation? But it was just Mr. Anthony, the doorman, with an expression between embarrassed and admiring. "Mrs. Albright, sorry to bother you so early, but there are some people downstairs wanting to speak with you. Journalists, it seems, from CBS and NBC. There's even a young woman who said she's from The View with Fiona." "Journalists?" Mrs. Albright repeated, incredulous. "What do they want with me?" "Your story, Mrs. Albright, everyone's talking about it. You've become a celebrity." Refusing to give interviews, Mrs. Albright asked Mr. Anthony not to let anyone up. She needed time to process everything that was happening. But the phone wouldn't stop ringing, and she soon discovered that it wasn't just journalists, lawyers offering services, TV producers wanting exclusivity for her story, even politicians wanting to associate her image with bills on elder rights. Around 9 in the morning, when the situation already seemed surreal, she received a call from Dr. Maxwell. "Mrs. Albright, I'm seeing the news. The story has exploded. How are you?" "Confused, Doctor. I didn't expect any of this. I just wanted to protect my home. I imagined there would be some repercussion, but I confess I underestimated the power of social media. Look, I'll be there in half an hour. You need guidance on how to deal with this exposure." When the lawyer arrived, she brought not only legal advice but also a tablet where she showed Mrs. Albright the dimension of what was happening. Hashtags like Eleanor the Warrior and He Who Does Not Respect Does Not Inherit were among the most trending topics on Twitter. Videos with her story accumulated millions of views. News pages published headlines like, "Elderly Woman Gives Lesson in Dignity After Being Humiliated by Daughter-in-Law at Wedding," and "The Response That Stopped the Nation." How a little old lady from Queens became a symbol of the fight against ageism. "This is crazy," Mrs. Albright murmured, looking at the images. "I just wanted to ensure a roof over my head for my old age." "It's much more than that now, Mrs. Albright. You've become a symbol. Do you know how many elderly women suffer similar abuses in silence? How many are manipulated by self-serving family members? Your attitude is inspiring many people to defend themselves." As if to confirm the lawyer's words, the phone rang again. It was Christine, the social worker from the New Dawn Institute. "Mrs. Albright, something incredible is happening. Since last night, we've received over 20 calls from seniors wanting information about our donation program with Usufruct. And 3 people have already confirmed that they want to do the same as you." Still trying to assimilate the impact of her actions, Mrs. Albright received another unexpected visit that morning. Mrs. Cecilia Miller, Vanessa's grandmother, who had approached her at the end of the party. "I came personally to ask forgiveness for my granddaughter," said the elegant lady, sitting on the simple sofa in Mrs. Albright's living room. "What Vanessa did is unforgivable. That's not how we raised her. You don't need to apologize for adult mistakes, Mrs. Cecilia." "Yes, I do. Perhaps we failed to pass on the right values. We spoiled her too much, demanded too little." The lady paused as if choosing her next words carefully. "I need to tell you something. I spent the night in the same hotel where the couple was staying before their trip. Vanessa and Luke argued all night. Guests in neighboring rooms even complained about the noise." Mrs. Albright felt a pang in her chest. Despite everything, the idea of Luke being unhappy still hurt her. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel bad," Mrs. Cecilia continued, "but so you understand the impact of your actions. My son-in-law, Vanessa's father, is furious. He accused Luke of not having control over the situation, as if you were a situation to be controlled and not a person to be respected. And Luke? How is he? Confused, I'd say, between the pressure from his wife and her family and the weight of what he did to his own mother. Deep down, I think he knows he made a profound mistake. After Mrs. Cecilia's departure, Mrs. Albright's day continued atypically. She received calls from Henry, informing her that the donation registration was fully formalized. From Dr. Oswald, the notary public, assuring her that everything was absolutely legal and unquestionable. From Mrs. Martha, bringing news that the story had reached TV with commentators debating the case on morning shows. Around late afternoon, when she finally found a moment of silence, she decided to go to the Brooklyn house. She needed to see the property that had been the epicenter of that whole storm. The taxi dropped her in front of the small corner townhouse with its well-kept garden and the old mango tree her father had planted on the day she was born. So many memories, so many stories within those walls. As she opened the gate, she noticed an unusual movement on the street. Neighbors watched her discreetly from their windows, some even waving shyly. An elderly lady who had lived in the house across the street for over 30 years crossed the street to speak with her. "Eleanor, my dear, I saw everything on TV, so proud of you. You showed that stuck-up daughter-in-law that you don't mess with old people." In a short time, a small crowd gathered on the sidewalk. Neighbors who had barely greeted her before now wanted to express solidarity, tell similar stories, thank her for the courage that inspired so many people. An elderly woman of almost 80 held her hands with tears in her eyes. "My daughter and son-in-law did the same to me. They sold my house as soon as I became a widow, saying it was for my own good, that I couldn't live alone anymore. Now I live in a small room at the back of their house like a servant. If only I had had your courage." That testimony, and several others she heard that afternoon, made Mrs. Albright realize that her personal story had touched on something much deeper and more universal: the fear of invisibility, disrespect and abandonment that so many elderly people faced in silence. Back at her apartment in Queens, she found more reporters in the building's lobby. This time, however, after talking to Dr. Maxwell on the phone, she decided to give a brief statement. "I just want to say that I am neither a hero nor a victim. I'm simply a mother who worked her whole life to give her son the best, and who, when disrespected, decided to value herself. If my story helps other people in the same situation, I'm happy. But what I truly hope is that it serves as a lesson. Respect is the foundation of any relationship, including family ones." That night, as she lay exhausted after the most intense day of her life, Mrs. Albright reflected on how in just 24 hours she had gone from an invisible figure, relegated to the last table at a wedding, to the center of national attention. It was a transformation she could never have predicted, and whose ramifications she still couldn't fully grasp. Before falling asleep, she looked once more at Mrs. Jasmine's embroidered handkerchief, now carefully washed and ironed, resting on her nightstand. "You have more strength than you imagine," her old protector had said. Only now did Mrs. Albright fully understand the meaning of those words. The next morning, she was woken by her cell phone ringing. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" she answered, still sleepy. "Mom?" Luke's voice sounded hesitant on the other end. "Can we talk?" "Luke?" Mrs. Albright's voice trembled slightly as she recognized her son on the other end of the line. "Where are you?" "Still at the hotel." "Mom, we need to talk in person. Can I come over?" Mrs. Albright hesitated. Part of her wanted to see her son, hug him, try to understand how they had reached that point. Another part feared another confrontation, more accusations, perhaps even an attempt to reverse the house donation. "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Son, please, Mom, I'm alone." That last phrase caught her by surprise, and then Vanessa, Luke paused. Vanessa went back to her parents' house. "We need to talk about that too." After a moment of silence, Mrs. Albright agreed, but set a condition. "Come at 2 in the afternoon. And you don't mind if Dr. Maxwell is present, do you?" "Who?" "My lawyer." Luke let out a heavy sigh on the other end of the line. "All right, Mom, whatever you want." After hanging up, Mrs. Albright immediately called Dr. Maxwell, reporting the conversation. The lawyer promised to be present, recommending caution. Don't sign anything, don't make promises, and especially don't let yourself be emotionally manipulated. Luke might be genuinely remorseful, or he might just be trying to fix the damage for his wife's family. The morning passed slowly, with Mrs. Albright alternating between nervous tidying in the apartment and anxious checks of the clock. Around noon, she received a call from Henry. "Mrs. Albright, I just called to let you know that your case is going to be discussed on the Sharon Abrams show today. People are already commenting on social media." "Are you going to watch?" "My goodness, Henry, does this never end? Why are so many people interested in the life of an old woman like me?" "You still don't understand?" "Your story represents that of thousands of seniors who are disrespected and manipulated every day. The difference is that you reacted. That inspires people." At 2 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. Mrs. Albright, who had already changed her clothes 3 times, trying to find a balance between looking well without appearing to be trying to impress, opened the door with a pounding heart. Luke stood there, with deep dark circles under his eyes and a dejected expression she had never seen before. He was no longer wearing the elegant wedding attire, but jeans and a simple shirt. For an instant, he seemed again like the boy who used to run to show her his report card when he got good grades. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice hoarse. Mrs. Albright felt the impulse to hug him, but restrained herself, remembering Dr. Maxwell's advice. Instead, she stepped aside. "Come in, son, Dr. Maxwell is on her way." Luke entered, looking around as if seeing the apartment for the first time. Perhaps he was noticing details he had never perceived before, the wear marks on the old furniture, the small adaptations Mrs. Albright had made to facilitate her mobility, the photographs of him at all stages of his life, carefully arranged on the shelves. "Would you like some coffee?" she offered, more out of habit than hospitality. "No, thank you. I need to talk to you before your lawyer arrives." They sat face to face in the small living room. Luke seemed not to know where to start. His restless hands betrayed his nervousness. "Mom, he began, then stopped, running his hands over his face. "I don't even know how to apologize for what happened." Mrs. Albright remained silent, giving him space to continue. "When Vanessa pushed you, I should have reacted. I should have stood up, defended you, put an end to it all. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe the alcohol or the pressure or—" He shook his head. "No, I won't make excuses. The truth is, I was a coward. And I've been a coward for a long time." Tears began to stream down Luke's face, something Mrs. Albright hadn't seen since he was a teenager. "What you did last night. Going back there, facing everyone, making that donation. It was a slap in the face. A slap I deserved. Only then did I realize how far I had allowed things to go. How much I had strayed from the values you taught me." Mrs. Albright felt her eyes well up, but she remained firm. "And Vanessa, what does she say about all this?" Luke gave a bitter laugh. "Vanessa is furious. With you, with me, with the world. She spent the night yelling that I destroyed her future, that I ruined the plans we had. When we woke up today, she packed her bags and went to her parents' house. She said she'd only come back when I resolved this situation and put my mother in her place. And what did you answer? That there is no situation to resolve, that what you did is done and that she should apologize, not demand changes." Luke paused, taking a deep breath. "That's when she said she needed to rethink our marriage, that maybe we made a mistake." Mrs. Albright felt a pang in her heart. Despite everything, she didn't wish her son suffering. "Luke, I'm so sorry your marriage is going through this. I never wanted to—" "No, Mom," he interrupted her. "Don't apologize. If the marriage doesn't survive this, maybe it wasn't meant to survive anyway. Vanessa showed who she really is, and so did I. The question now is, can I at least fix my relationship with you?" At that moment, the doorbell rang. It was Dr. Maxwell, punctual as always. After formal introductions, the three sat in the living room. The lawyer, sensing the emotionally charged atmosphere, went straight to the point. "Mr. Albright, I understand this is primarily a family conversation, but as Mrs. Albright's legal representative, I need to clarify a few points. The donation of the Brooklyn property to the New Dawn Institute is irrevocable. All documents have been duly registered and are in full force. If your intention in coming here today is to question this legal act—" "It's nothing like that," Luke interrupted, seeming genuinely offended. "I didn't come here because of the house. I came to try to save my relationship with my mother. The house, The house is hers to do what she wants. It always was. I just got carried away. Dr. Maxwell looked at Mrs. Albright as if silently asking if she believed him. The elderly woman gave a slight affirmative nod. Luke, are you really going to end your marriage because of this? Mrs. Albright asked, unable to hide her maternal concern. He averted his gaze, fixing it on his own hands. I don't know, Mom. I love Vanessa, but... He paused, choosing his words. The marriage opened my eyes to sides of her I didn't know. And to sides of myself, too. I need to think about what I really want from life, and what kind of man I want to be. The conversation continued for over an hour. Luke explained how he had felt pressured by Vanessa's family to live up to expectations, how he gradually began to see his own family and origins as something to overcome, not to value. He spoke about how his father-in-law, a successful real estate entrepreneur, constantly suggested opportunities involving the Brooklyn house. He always said that neighborhood was appreciating, that the land was worth a fortune, that it would be a waste to keep it as an old house. I think I let them plant that idea in my head. It started as a comment here, an insinuation there, and before I knew it, it was in all our plans. Mrs. Albright listened attentively, processing every word. It was painful, but also revealing, to understand how her son had strayed so far from her values. And what do you want now, Luke? She asked finally. A chance, Mom, a chance to start over, to earn your respect again. I'm not asking to move back here, nor for you to undo the donation. I just want to be your son again. Dr. Maxwell, who observed everything with the keen eyes of someone who had seen many attempted and failed family reconciliations, intervened. Mrs. Albright, if I may suggest, perhaps a period of gradual rapprochement would be ideal. Regular meetings, always in a public place initially, to rebuild trust little by little. Luke nodded, seeming genuinely willing to accept any condition. What do you think, Mum? Before Mrs. Albright could answer, the doorbell rang again. When she opened the door, she came face to face with Vanessa, her face contorted with fury, accompanied by her parents. I knew it. The young woman screamed when she saw Luke sitting in the living room. You said you were going to the bank, but you came running to your mummy. Coward. Mr. Miller, Vanessa's father, stepped forward, his posture intimidating. Mrs. Albright, we came to resolve this situation once and for all. What you did yesterday was a pathetic little show that is harming my family's and my company's reputation. Mrs. Albright, who in other times would have shrunk before such imposing figures, remained serene. There's nothing to resolve, Mr. Miller, and I don't recall inviting you into my home. Luke stood up, positioning himself beside his mother, while Dr. Maxwell watched intently, ready to intervene if necessary. You shouldn't be here, Luke said firmly. I'm having a private conversation with my mother. Private? Vanessa scoffed. Nothing is private in this family. Your mother made a point of publicly humiliating all of us. Do you know I can't even look at my phone without seeing nasty comments? That my friends are blocking me on social media? That your father is getting calls at the office asking if he approves of that behavior? It was then that Dr. Maxwell stepped forward, adopting a professional demeanor. Mrs. Miller, if I'm not mistaken. I am Dr. Paula Maxwell, Mrs. Albright's attorney. I must remind you that the only person publicly humiliated in this story was my client, when she was pushed by you during the wedding party. Everything that followed was a direct consequence of your own actions. Mr. Miller snorted, clearly unaccustomed to being confronted. Listen here, Doctor. I don't care who you are. We came here to reach an agreement. This story is hurting the family business, and we won't tolerate it. How much do you want to undo this ridiculous donation and stop this circus? A tense silence fell over the room. Luke looked at his father-in-law with an expression of shock, as if only at that moment he fully understood with whom he had allied himself. Vanessa seemed torn between the satisfaction of seeing her father taking charge and the embarrassment of his direct approach. Mrs. Albright, for her part, felt a strange, almost supernatural calm. Mr. Miller, she said, her voice firm, there is no amount of money that would make me change my mind. The house now belongs to the Institute, and so it will remain. As for the circus, as you call it, I didn't create cameras or social media. I just lived my truth, as I always have. Mom, Luke's voice sounded surprisingly authoritative, I would like Mr. Miller, Mrs. Giselle, and Vanessa to leave, please. We were in the middle of an important conversation. Vanessa's eyes widened, incredulous. "You're choosing her over me? After everything my father did for you?" Luke looked deeply into his wife's eyes, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "I'm not choosing anyone, Vanessa. I'm just asking for respect for my mother in her home. If that's a problem for you, then we have much more serious issues in our marriage than a house in Brooklyn." Mr. Miller, red with anger, grabbed his daughter's arm. "Let's go, Vanessa. It's clear your husband needs to reconsider his priorities." Turning to Luke, he added, "You have 24 hours to resolve this, or you can forget your promotion in the marketing department." After the stormy departure of the Miller family, a heavy silence hung over the small apartment. Luke seemed exhausted, as if he had just gone through a physical ordeal. "I'm so sorry about that, Mom. I didn't know they were coming." Mrs. Albright watched her son with a new gaze. "Perhaps there was hope after all. You work for her father." Luke nodded, uncomfortable. "For 2 years. That's how I met Vanessa. And what will you do now?" He sat down again, running his hands over his face in a gesture of weariness. "I don't know. Probably look for another job. I can't keep working for him after this." Dr. Maxwell, who had remained discreetly in the background during the confrontation, approached. "If I may make an observation, what we just witnessed was very revealing, Mr. Albright. What happened here today shows that the situation goes far beyond a simple family discussion. Though there are issues of power, control, and manipulation involved." Mrs. Albright sighed, feeling the weight of recent events. "Luke, I don't want to be the cause of your marriage's destruction or your careers. It's not you." "Mom," he replied with a clarity that surprised them both. "It's the consequence of my own choices. Choices I need to reevaluate now." When Luke finally said goodbye hours later, there was a tacit understanding between mother and son. It would not be an immediate or easy reconciliation, but there was a path to follow. A path that began with mutual respect and continued with the patient reconstruction of broken trust. "I'll call tomorrow," he promised at the door. "If that's all right with you." Mrs. Albright nodded, allowing herself a small smile. "I'll be waiting." "Son?" 3 months had passed since that turbulent afternoon in Mrs. Albright's apartment. The New York winter was breathing its last, and the goldenrods were beginning to color the city's avenues, announcing the approaching spring. At the Brooklyn house, Mrs. Albright carefully pruned the rose bushes in the front garden, a task she had resumed with pleasure in recent weeks. Much had changed in her life. After her story went viral, she received countless invitations for interviews, appearances on TV shows, and even proposals for books and films based on her experience. She refused most, accepting only a few opportunities where she could speak about elder rights and the importance of intergenerational respect. The New Dawn Institute had invited her to be an ambassador for its Safe Haven program, which had grown exponentially after the publicity generated by the case. Dozens of vulnerable seniors had benefited, finding a legal way to protect their assets while ensuring their security in old age. Henry, the young waiter who had helped her in her most difficult moment, had completed his law degree and was now interning at Dr. Maxwell's firm, specializing in elder rights. Every now and then, he would stop by for coffee, bringing news from the legal world and proudly talking about the cases he was working on. Mrs. Martha, the gossipy neighbor from Queens, called almost daily, keeping her informed about the latest neighborhood happenings and always asking, "And Luke, Eleanor, how are things?" Luke. Her son was in a process of deep personal transformation. After the confrontation with the Millers, he had indeed resigned from his ex-father-in-law's company, abandoning a promising position and a generous salary. He spent a few weeks unemployed until he secured a job as a marketing analyst at an education startup, earning less, but, as he himself said, sleeping better at night. His marriage to Vanessa had officially ended 1 month after the incident. The divorce was quick, facilitated by the fact that they had no significant joint assets or children. Luke told his mother that the separation, though painful, brought a strange sense of liberation, as if he was finally disentangling himself from expectations that were never truly his own. Mother and son were gradually rebuilding their relationship. They started with bi-weekly lunches in neutral restaurants, then moved on to short visits to her apartment, until they reached regular Sunday meetings at the Brooklyn house, where Luke helped with small repairs and garden maintenance. That Saturday morning, while tending to the rose bushes, Mrs. Albright heard the familiar sound of Luke's car parking. He wasn't expected until the next day, which intrigued her. "Luke, has something happened?" she asked, seeing him walk through the garden with a determined expression. "Nothing's wrong. Mom, I just need to talk to you about something important." He carried a folder of documents under his arm. They went into the house together and sat at the kitchen table, where so many family meals had been shared over the decades. Luke seemed nervous, but in a positive way, like someone about to share big news. "Mom, remember when I said I wanted to show I deserved your respect again? That I wanted to be the son you raised?" "Of course I remember, son. Well, I've been working on it these past few months, not just in our conversations or visits, but also to this." He opened the folder and took out some papers, placing them on the table. They were official documents with notary stamps and various signatures. "What is this, Luke?" "It's the deed to an apartment, in the same building where you live in Queens." He paused, observing his mother's reaction. "I bought it with the money I saved over the past few years. It's not much, just a studio, but it's mine. Fully paid for, no mortgage." Mrs. Albright examined the documents, confused. "But why buy in my building? I thought you wanted distance from that neighborhood, that you considered it too simple?" Luke finished with an embarrassed smile. "Yes, I said a lot of foolish things about our origins. Things I deeply regret. The truth is, I want to be close to you, Mom. Not to control you or take care of anything, but to be present. To be family again." Mrs. Albright felt her eyes well up. It was a surprise she hadn't imagined even in her most optimistic dreams. "But what about your job? Isn't it too far?" "A little, but nothing unbearable. And the company has a work-from-home policy 2 days a week." He held his mother's hands across the table. "Besides, there's something else I want to do, if you'll allow it." From his shirt pocket, Luke took out a small old key, which Mrs. Albright recognized immediately. It was the key to the Brooklyn house, the same one she had given to the Institute as a symbol of the donation. "How did you get this?" "I spoke with Dr. Maxwell and the Institute's board. I explained what had happened, how I regretted it, how I've been working to fix things, and I proposed an agreement." Mrs. Albright looked at him, intrigued. "What agreement, Luke?" "The house remains with the Institute." "That doesn't change. And you keep your lifelong right to residency, of course. But I offered to be responsible for the maintenance and care of the property. Officially, I'll be a kind of volunteer caretaker, ensuring everything is in order for you. And in the future, when the house is effectively used by the Institute, I will continue to volunteer, helping with the social programs they develop here." Mrs. Albright was speechless. This was a gesture that went far beyond a simple apology or an attempt at reconciliation. It was a long-term commitment, a recognition of the value of the house and the family history it represented, even if it was no longer a property he could inherit. The Institute's board agreed. Luke continued, filling the silence. In fact, they were quite impressed. They said it's rare to see someone willing to contribute in this way, especially considering the circumstances. The key is symbolic, of course. You remain the only legitimate resident. I'll only come when invited, like now. "My son," Mrs. Albright began, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't even know what to say." "You don't need to say anything, Mom. I just want you to know that I understood the lesson. That phrase you said that night, 'He who does not respect does not inherit,' it hammered in my head for months. And I realized that the true inheritance was never this house or any material possession. It was the example, the values, the dignity you always showed. That's what I want to inherit and pass on someday." At that moment, Mrs. Albright's phone rang. It was Dr. Maxwell calling to confirm if Luke had arrived and presented the proposal. "Yes, Doctor. We're talking right now," Mrs. Albright replied. "It's an unexpected proposal, but a positive one, don't you think?" The lawyer's voice sounded optimistic. "When Luke approached me with this idea, I confess I was initially skeptical, but after several conversations and seeing his commitment in recent months, I concluded it was genuine. The Institute is also very satisfied. Having someone from the family committed to the property's maintenance and later to the social projects adds a beautiful layer to your story, Mrs. Albright." After hanging up, mother and son remained in a comfortable silence, as they hadn't shared in years. It was Luke who finally broke it. "There's one more thing, Mom. I'm thinking of going back to school. An MBA in social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship? That's using business principles to solve social problems, creating businesses that are profitable but also have a positive impact on society. He smiled a little shy. I think being around the people at the education startup inspired me, and also this whole experience with the New Dawn Institute. Mrs. Albright smiled, recognizing in her adult son the same sparkle in his eyes he had as a child when discovering a new passion. I think that's a wonderful idea. Luke, there's one more thing. He hesitated. I met someone, a coworker, Camilla. She's a social projects coordinator at the company. We've been dating for a few weeks. That's great, son. When will I meet her? Very soon, I hope. We're taking it slow. After everything that happened with Vanessa, I want to be sure I'm doing things for the right reasons, not just out of pressure or appearances. The conversation continued, natural and fluid, as it hadn't been in a long time. They talked about Luke's work, about the new friends Mrs. Albright had made in the neighborhood, about the Institute's projects. They had lunch together, a simple meal she prepared, and then sat on the porch to enjoy the mild afternoon sun. It was there that Luke noticed Mrs. Jasmine's embroidered handkerchief, carefully framed and hanging on the wall. Isn't that the handkerchief you tried to give me at the wedding? The one that fell when... He couldn't complete the sentence. Yes, that's it. Henry retrieved it for me that night. I decided to frame it and keep it as a reminder. A reminder of what? Mrs. Albright smiled, looking at the delicate embroidery that bore her old protector's initials, of the power of a gesture, of the importance of respect, and most importantly, that it's never too late to start over. When Luke said goodbye at the end of the afternoon, there was a new lightness between them. It wasn't the perfect fairy tale ending, where all problems magically resolve themselves. It was something more valuable and real, the beginning of a new chapter, built on more solid foundations of mutual respect and understanding. A week later, Mrs. Albright was invited to participate in an event at the New Dawn Institute, where she would share her experience with other seniors. On the makeshift stage of the community center, she looked at the audience and saw attentive faces, some curious, others seeking inspiration, all united by the same quest, dignity in old age. In the front row, Luke smiled encouragingly. Beside him, a young woman with curly hair and a gentle smile whom Mrs. Albright supposed was Camilla. Further back, Henry, Dr. Maxwell, Mrs. Martha, and several neighbors from both Queens and Brooklyn. An improbable community formed from a moment of crisis. Good afternoon, everyone, Mrs. Albright began, adjusting the microphone. My name is Eleanor Albright, and 3 months ago, I was just an ordinary elderly woman who thought her voice no longer mattered. As she told her story, she observed how each word resonated with the audience. She saw heads nodding in recognition, eyes welling up with tears from those who identified with the pain of disrespect, smiles of approval in moments of overcoming. What I learned on this journey, she concluded, is that dignity is not a privilege. It is a right, and that respect is not begged for. It is demanded. My story is not about a house or a marriage or a family conflict. It's about setting boundaries, about saying out loud this far and no further. At the end of her speech, the audience rose in an emotional ovation. Luke was the first to applaud, pride etched on his face. When she descended from the stage, she was embraced by her son, a genuine and strong hug, as they hadn't shared in years. You were incredible, Mom, he whispered in her ear. Thank you for not giving up on me. That night, back at the Brooklyn house, Mrs. Albright sat on the porch and watched the stars. Pensive. Mrs. Jasmine's handkerchief, now framed, seemed to glow under the soft light of the table lamp. You have more strength than you imagine, her old protector had said. How prophetic that advice had been. Her life at 68 had taken a turn she never would have imagined. From a faded, almost invisible figure, relegated to the last table at a wedding, she had transformed into a symbol of resistance and dignity. Her story, which began with humiliation and pain, had turned into an inspiration for so many others, and Luke, her only son, was finding his own way back, not to the house he had once hoped to inherit, but to the truly important values she had always tried to teach him. Mrs. Albright smiled at the stars, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in a long time. The journey wasn't over, of course. There was still much to learn, to forgive, to rebuild. But the first steps had been taken, the foundations laid. On the horizon, a new phase was dawning, not just for her and Luke, but for all seniors who, inspired by her courage, learned to say, "He who does not respect, does not inherit." And as night fell over New York City, enveloping the city in its starry mantle, Mrs. Eleanor Albright, at 68, discovered that the last chapter of her story was far from being written. In fact, it was just the beginning. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope Mrs. Albright's story has touched your hearts and perhaps even inspired reflections on respect, dignity, and the true values of life. For more emotional narratives like this, we have prepared a special playlist with stories that explore the complexities of family relationships and the challenges of old age. Find the link here on the left side of the screen. If this journey of overcoming and rebirth has stirred your emotions, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Every day we bring unique stories that celebrate human strength and resilience in all its forms. Share with friends and family who may identify with Mrs. Albright's journey, and don't miss our upcoming content. Tell us in the comments, do you know an Eleanor Albright in your life? Someone who, even in the face of adversity, maintained their dignity and taught valuable lessons about respect and true love. We look forward to reading your stories. Vanessa smiled, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Don't worry, Mrs. Albright. Daddy will take care of everything. Mr. Miller wants a party befitting our social standing. Those words echoed in Mrs. Albright's head for weeks. Our social standing. As if her son had been born with a silver spoon, not on the worn mattress of a maid's room, where they lived for the first few years after Luke's birth. Now, with only 2 weeks left until the big day, Mrs. Albright counted the savings stored in the hot chocolate tin she hid behind her recipe books. She had saved almost $5,000 to give her son as a gift, the result of extra sewing jobs she had taken on in recent months. It wasn't much compared to what Mr. Miller would spend, but it represented sleepless nights, needle-pricked fingers, and extra hours at the bus stop after an exhausting day. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Mrs. Albright answered, but no one responded on the other end. She was about to hang up when she heard Vanessa's voice, apparently talking to someone without realizing the call had already been answered. "It's unbearable, Camilla. Luke's mother is a country bumpkin, you should see. She lives in this tiny apartment full of old stuff, and she keeps interfering with the preparations, as if she knows anything about high-class parties." Mrs. Albright felt her heart clench, but she continued listening, paralyzed. "No, she won't sit at the head table, of course not. I've already arranged with the event planner. She'll be far from the altar at the last table, along with those distant cousins of Luke's that we had to invite out of politeness." A sharp laugh cut through the air. "After the wedding, things will change drastically. I've already told Luke that house has to be sold. It's in a terrible neighborhood, but the land is worth a fortune. We can buy a better apartment with the money. After all, it'll be his someday, right?" Mrs. Albright felt her legs weaken. The house Vanessa referred to was the only asset she owned besides the apartment she lived in. A simple house in Brooklyn, which she had inherited from her parents and rented out to supplement her pension. Luke knew how much that property meant to her, how much she had fought to keep it, refusing purchase offers even in difficult times. "Has Luke already agreed?" asked Camilla on the other end of the line. "He does everything I want, my friend. At first he was a bit reluctant, said his mother is attached to the house, that it's where his grandparents lived, but he's giving in. And after we get married, there's no more mommy dearest stuff. Priorities change, you know." Another laugh followed by a sigh. "I have to hang up now. I need to go to the florist to sort out the orchid problem. Can you believe they want to give me Phalaenopsis instead of Vandus? It's absurd. See you Friday, bye." The phone made a noise, as if Vanessa was checking if the call was still active. Mrs. Albright quickly hung up, her hands trembling. She sat on the kitchen chair, feeling the weight of those words. The pain was not from the rejection or contempt of her future daughter-in-law, that in a way she had already intuited. What truly hurt her was knowing that Luke, her only son, the one for whom she sold even her wedding ring to pay for his college entrance exam prep course, had agreed to sell his grandparents' house. In the back of her jewelry drawer, she kept a hand-embroidered silk handkerchief, an heirloom from Mrs. Jasmine, an elderly lady for whom she had worked as a companion in her last years of life. When you are in difficulty, hold this handkerchief to your chest and remember, you have more strength than you imagine, were the last words of her former employer, who she later discovered had also left a small sum that allowed Mrs. Albright to pay off her apartment mortgage. Holding the delicate handkerchief between her calloused fingers, Mrs. Albright made a decision. She would go to the wedding with her head held high. She would give her blessing to her son as any mother would. But afterward, she would have to find a way to protect what was hers. Not out of revenge or resentment, but out of survival and dignity.